so that he can judge whether we have recalibrated or calibrated the natural security forum correctly. And I was extremely pleased that he signed off on the concept and told us to go execute it. And one of my rules of thumb is that when the former Supreme Allied Commander at NATO tells you to do something, you better do it, and you better do it with passion and intensity. So with that, Admiral, I'd like to invite you, and thank you very much for being part of this.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Well said. Well, let me start by getting the microphone down to a normal person's height. Always a challenge for me anytime I take over a microphone. Johan, thank you for that very kind introduction, and Admiral Cosgrave, thank you as well for the connection with Stimson, which is an organization I've come to admire greatly.
Okay, there seems to be prevalence on this side of the room here. Admiral White is next.
Ali, nice seeing you. This is a proud graduate of the Fletcher School, by the way, although this is not a planted question. I have no idea what he's going to ask me.
I was wondering if I may ask two quick questions. One,
sure.
I was wondering about your thoughts on sort of the context of your remarks as related to the Arctic and its challenges. And when you mentioned internationalizing cooperation, I was wondering if you saw this as perhaps an opportunity for the United States to finally get around to adopting the UN Convention.
Yeah, that really does sound like a planted question. On the UN Law of the Sea Treaty, yes, yes, and yes. I mean, it's absurd that the United States has not ratified it. There's a long, rich history of commentary on this. I myself have testified at least 3 times on that subject. We came very close to ratifying it several years ago. That's fallen away. I think it's unlikely with the Trump administration looking at their general proclivities. It would appear to me unlikely that we're going to see that in the near future. So the United States will have to continue to rely on, as we have now for decades, on customary international law, the activities of other nations, even older traditional ideas of high seas freedoms and so forth. So unfortunately, not a big connection there. In terms of the Arctic, leaving for a moment the fishing piece of this, I think the Arctic actually represents an opportunity as a zone of cooperation. If we look to the Antarctic and the history of cooperation there going back really a century, there are many lessons and norms I think that ultimately could be applied to the Arctic. The problem is the state of tension that currently exists between Russia, which has the largest front porch up there, and the 5 NATO nations that all have the second largest chunk. The United States, Canada, Norway, Denmark, and Iceland. So while we have the state of tension between Russia and the United States, I think, and NATO and the United States, I think it's going to be difficult, Ali, to really move in a cooperative direction. But let's wish those away for a moment and say that here's a logical place, relatively unspoiled, where I think interests roughly align. All nations, including Russia and the other Arctic nations, have a vested interest in an environment in the north that is open, that allows trade to move freely, that protects the environment, that shares resources equitably, that has effective search and rescue, that can effectively conduct what I'll call science diplomacy. I think there's actually a fairly rich basket of possible cooperative activities in the north. So if I were advising the Trump administration, and they are looking for zones of cooperation with Russia, which they may well be, I would say this would be one. And I think let's see what happens. There has never, for example, been an Arctic summit in human history. Why not have a summit of Arctic leaders to address all of this? And I think it would be a way to take this idea of natural security and move it into the zone of national security by making the Arctic a zone of cooperation, not a zone of competition or, God forbid, a zone of conflict. I'll close on that by saying if we're going to do that from the U.S. perspective, for God's sake, let's build some more icebreakers. How many do we have, Commandant? 1.5?
We have 2 operating right now and 1 broken.
Yeah, 2.5. So Russia operates 27. China, which has, last time I checked, no Arctic territory, operates 14. Denmark, a tiny nation, very respectable one, operates 7. We have 2.5. We need to get on that if we're going to have natural as well as national security.